So watching the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct at work was a mistake because this fucking happened, and I had to hold in an official fucking feral scream in my lungs. I had to hold back my reaction because I was at work, but this was a huge announcement for me. It's not probably the biggest announcement with Switch 2, but for me, this literally is a fucking release title for Switch 2. Do you know how fucking insane that is? At least to me. To me, that's insane. To some other people, maybe they're looking at this like it's just whatever. But I'm a huge Bravely Default fan. I have a fucking Bravely Default shirt on. Even. Well, I actually just decided to wear this because of this being announced at the Direct. But I don't think a lot of people realize that I am like a big Bravely Default guy. Most people know me as the Pokemon guy, and to be fair, I do talk about Pokemon a lot. But Bravely Default is something I want to talk about more, but it's not super easy to talk about when there's only like, 3 games? 4 if you count 4 Heroes of Light. But if you don't count that, there's only 3 games, and they're very spread out releases to the point where after Bravely Second, it was debatable whether or not that we were going to get any new Bravely games because it looked like the series was over. Because Bravely Second sold very poorly in Japan, and I think in the West as well. I'm not sure about that one. That I'm not sure, but it definitely did not sell well in Japan. For reasons I'm not going to go into this video because it's a whole other can of worms. But people who don't know, huge Bravely Default guy. Like, okay, let me give you an idea real quick. Okay, so first off, we got the original game that started this whole series, which I'm going to do a video essay on this. I swear to God, I will, and I'll go into my thoughts, my full thoughts on this game. But 4 Heroes of Light was the game that started it all. This game was not supposed to be 4 Heroes of Light. It was supposed to be a 3D remake of Final Fantasy V, but the team decided we're going to make an original game instead because we feel like we're experienced enough, we might as well, and they wanted to make a Final Fantasy game if the old games were still a thing, in the sense of like, what if Final Fantasy never evolved past a turn-based game, and then boom, we get this game. And I first heard about this game in a Nintendo Power magazine, funnily enough, and I was like, wow, a multiplayer Final Fantasy game? That's so cool. Anyways, who knew that this game had multiplayer in it? I did. The multiplayer in this game is not great. But this game, in general, not bad. I think it's aged a little bit. Kinda. Like I said, one of these days I'll make the video essay on it and you'll see my full thoughts on it. But point being is that this was my entry into Bravely Default. I did not know that at the time because I did not know this game would become a series. Because basically, after this game got finished development-wise and after it started to sell, the team wanted to make a sequel to this game, but they wanted it to become its own thing and not just another Final Fantasy spin-off. Like, they wanted it to become its own series, which I guess in its own way is still a Final Fantasy spin-off, just it doesn't have Final Fantasy in the name. And that's Bravely Default. And yes, this is the collector's edition. I did buy it from a scalper because my GameStop ran out of pre-orders for it. Those are dark times. But yeah, this is the collector's edition for Bravely Default 1. Love this game to death. I originally found out about Bravely Default 1 because I was following a Nintendo news channel called Nintendo 3DS. It was by this Australian guy. He always wore like a beanie. He snagged the name Nintendo 3DS before Nintendo could, to the point where Nintendo actually would DM him asking him for the channel, and they were willing to pay him for it. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep the channel, so Nintendo didn't do anything like it. They could have, probably, but they didn't end up doing anything like any legal action. He just got to keep the name, and he kept doing videos talking about 3DS news and eventually Wii U news until he just stopped one day and who knows what happened to him. But he talked about this game on there for the first time, and what he did, he was probably not the first person to talk about Bravely Default, but he was one of the first people I heard about it from, because he would cover some games that would only get Japanese releases just to talk about it in case they did get a Western release, which Bravely Default did. At the time, we did not know if Bravely Default was going to get a Western release. But it did, and we have it right here. And this is not the original Bravely Default, actually. So, Bravely Default in Japan has two different versions. We have the Bravely Default Flying Fairy, which is actually what this fucking remaster is more based off of, which is insane to me. And we have Bravely Default Where the Fairy Flies, also known as Bravely Default for the sequel, which is what we got in the Western release of the game. It's actually really weird to think about that Bravely Default Where the Fairy Flies, or for the sequel version of the game, not only was it released in Japan first, obviously, but when it was released in Japan, it had not only English as a language setting, but it also had the English dub, which is weird to me. It's just a weird thought to me. I don't know of any Japanese player who would play the game in Japanese text with English dialogue. I mean, English voice acting. That's weird. I don't know. It's just something to think about. I don't remember if this version in particular has an option to switch between the two. I want to say no, because this was before the point when people actually cared about listening to a Japanese dub for like games in general. I mean, nowadays we have any fucking language option for the dub. If you want to listen to a fucking game in German, you could do that. But like back then, it was like most people wanted like the Japanese dub. Most likely couldn't get it. Some people don't like English dubs for a bunch of different reasons. I think the English dub of Bravely Default here really fucking stellar. I think it's probably one of the better acted games I've played. I'm no voice actor critic, but I think the voice acting in this holds up pretty well. But yeah, I ended up playing this game because I really, really love job class like games like this, like old Final Fantasy. If you like old Final Fantasy, you will fucking love this game, because this is basically like a Super Nintendo PS1 Final Fantasy game right here. Really good shit. So, when I found out that they were making a sequel, of course I got it. And this is the collector's edition. And I also made sure this time to get it from GameStop and not from a fucking scalper. So that was cool. Also, before I talk about the second, real quick, this game is so funny to me because I don't know if people realize this, that Bravely Default for the sequel, I guess you can't really count the original because the original was not released in the West, but this game sold better in the US than it did in Japan. And then, because of that, Square Enix XX were like, wait, JRPGs sell in the West? And then you repeat that ad nauseum, because for some reason they don't think there's a market for this kind of shit. I don't know why. Anyways, Bravely Second. This game, probably my favorite Bravely game, funnily enough. I remember getting this and my mom seeing this cover on this box and thinking that I bought a fucking, like, something like a Playboy magazine, and I'm like, I guess she's got tits, alright. I'm glad to know that my mom thought I was a gooner for Anime Woman, when in reality I'm actually a gay furry, so, well, but I remember making sure I got this off of GameStop. I remember following the news for this game very closely as well. Probably way closer to the Default's news, to the point where there was an April Fool's post on Tumblr that I saw where people were saying that the English release for Bravely Second was canceled, and I fell for it because I was like, no, don't cancel the English release for this game. I need it really fucking bad. But yeah, I didn't know if this was going to get an English release, because even though Bravely Default sold very well, we didn't get news about this game's English release for like a hot minute, and I was like, oh, maybe they won't do it. And then the game released in Japan first, like way before it released in the West. I want to say it was like a good year and a half. I don't remember on top of my head. It felt like a year and a half. But I remember seeing the demo for this game, like the Japanese demo. Like, I'm not even talking about like the eShop demo. I'm talking about the original, like, fucking press release demo for this game and thinking, wow, it looks so good, but the music sounds like ass. And I remember thinking to myself way later down the line, was I just gaslit? Because the music in this game, spoiler alert, really not that bad. It's got some problems still in the final release, but like overall, pretty great. I rewatched those press demos later down the line, and yeah, they were incomplete midis. That's why they sound like ass. But it does suck that Revo or Sound Horizon did not make the soundtrack for this game due to schedule conflictions. And I do feel like part of that makes this game's soundtrack a little forgettable. Which, fun fact, the people who made this soundtrack made the most popular Hatsune Miku song. I didn't know that until recently. How was I supposed to know that? But yeah, really second, my favorite game in the series. I think this game is great. There's a lot of people who don't like it. It sold terribly in Japan for a bunch of different reasons. The Western release is slightly different than the Japanese release. There's some, I think, quality of life, but they also did change some implications for the story, which was because of feedback from the Japanese release and whatnot, which is actually kind of interesting. Because usually when they do a huge quality of life thing like that, we would just get a whole nother game, like for the sequel or Where the Fairy Flies, but not this time. The Western release just is updated and the Japanese release is not. And what was changed is something that people debate about. It's hard to go into within a short video like this. I don't know if this video is going to be short, but I would have to go into like a whole fucking spiel about that, and then that's a whole other topic for a whole nother day. But what's cool about this collector's edition is that I'm not going to open it, but there is the art book, a full art book, and on top of that there is also a small selection of the OST. That's cool. But that art book I bought twice, for people who didn't know, because I have it right here again. And the reason why I bought it twice is because while that art book is this art book in full, because Bravely Second was one of the few collector's edition games where they give you a full art book. It was not fully translated. It was about, I would say, 80% fully translated, but there were a lot of things in that book that were not, so I bought it again. But even before I bought this, I bought this, which is the original art book for Bravely Default 1. I don't know if you can even see it. I was holding it upside down. There you go. But the reason why I bought this, because I imported this from Japan, because I didn't know they were going to translate it. So I bought it again. So I have the Bravely Default 1 art book twice and the Bravely Second art book twice as well, which is, that's my life, I guess. I eventually want to get the Bravely Default 2 art book, just to say I have it, but it's a very low priority of mine because Bravely Default 2, I did not like the direction they were taking the series, and not a bad game, but there was a lot of things about Bravely Default 2 in particular that I was not a big fan of, and it felt like they were trying to be safe to get the series back off the ground again, as opposed to doing something not risky, but like doing something that actually had, I don't know, like some kind of kick or flavor to it. It felt very bland. But that's a whole fucking other mess. Point being is that I'm a big Bravely Default guy. I hope one day I can show it more than just this video, and I feel like there's so much more I can gush about these games. I love them so fucking much, man. But a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know my, I would say my eternity, but there's not really eternity. It's like, I guess it's like 4 game series I love to death, and that would be, I guess, 5. So, yeah, 5. Because my big, like, 5 game series I love to death are Pokemon, Final Fantasy, Legend of Zelda, Bravely Default, and I guess Xenoblade 2. Not Xenoblade 2 like the game, but the Xenoblade series also. Because, yeah, I guess I like Xenoblade. But yeah, I hope in the future I could talk more about Bravely Default stuff. Also, for people wondering, the reason why I don't have a Bravely Default 2 Collector's Edition is because it doesn't exist. I think this is actually due to COVID, if I had to guess, but I actually don't know. Because when Bravely Default 2 came out, it was around when COVID was like really coming into effect, so we just didn't see one. And then there's also, to my knowledge, no collector's edition for the remaster, which, to be fair, collector's editions aren't really a big thing anymore. They were back in like the 2010s, but I don't really see them as much anymore. And if they are a thing, it's usually just like additional bonus, like, oh, you get to have this sword cosmetic for free. And like, yay, hooray! I love video games. Whoa. But yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a Bravely Default 3, which is... God, that is really confusing, isn't it? But even if there is going to be a Bravely Default 3 in the future, I don't know if it's going to have a collector's edition, and I don't know if it's going to be like Bravely Default 2 where it's its own story, or if it will actually continue the story being told in Bravely Default 1 and 2nd, because those two stories are connected, and the second ends on a cliffhanger, and it drives me insane to this day, but that's a whole other can of worms. I promise. Anyways, I want Bradley's sword to be real, so, and you do too!